The wind howled across the Wyoming plains, fierce and unrelenting, turning the sky into a swirling sea of gold and brown dust. Inside the rocking stagecoach, Sarah Mitchell clutched her sister's hand, her heart pounding as the wheels rattled over the rough trail. They had left behind the only home they had ever known in Boston, trading polished streets and gentle manners for an unknown inheritance on the edge of the frontier. Beside her, Emma, her identical twin, stared through the dirt-smeared window, her blue eyes wide with worry. "Do you think it's real, Sarah?" she asked softly. "A ranch? All that land?" Sarah tried to sound confident, but her voice trembled. "It has to be. It's all we have left." 3 days ago, a lawyer's telegram had arrived with shocking news. Their uncle, Thomas Mitchell, had passed away, leaving his entire ranch to them. But if they didn't claim it within 30 days, it would be sold to settle debts. They had no family left, no money, and nowhere else to go. So here they were, 2 city-raised girls heading into a land ruled by dust, danger, and men with guns. The coach jolted violently and came to a sudden stop. The driver's shout was nearly lost in the storm. The door flew open, and wind filled the coach like a living thing. A tall figure appeared in the doorway, broad-shouldered, his outline huge against the red sky. "Ladies," he said, his voice deep and calm despite the chaos around them. "This is as far as the driver's going." "Storm's too bad to keep on. You looking for the Mitchell place?" Sarah blinked through the dust. "Yes, we are. I'm Sarah Mitchell, and this is my sister, Emma. We've come to claim our uncle's ranch." The man studied them for a long moment. Even with the wind tearing at his coat and hat, he seemed steady as the mountains behind him. Finally, he nodded. "Name's Colt Brennan. I've been running the ranch since your uncle fell ill. Nobody told me he had nieces back east." He stepped aside and held out a gloved hand. "Come on, let's get you out of this storm." They climbed down, skirts whipping around their legs, eyes stinging from the wind. Colt grabbed their trunks with one hand each, as if they weighed nothing, and led the way toward the shadow of a large house barely visible through the swirling dust. The driver, eager to be gone, shouted a quick goodbye and turned the coach around, vanishing into the storm. By the time they reached the porch, Sarah could barely see. Colt shoved the heavy door open, and the 3 stumbled inside. The sudden quiet was almost shocking. The only sound was their heavy breathing and the muffled roar of the storm outside. Colt turned, removing his hat. Sarah's breath caught. He was younger than she expected, perhaps 30, with sun-browned skin, wheat-colored hair, and eyes the color of frozen lakes. His presence filled the room, quiet but commanding. "You're twins," he said simply, his voice thoughtful. Didn't expect that Emma stepped forward cautiously. "You knew our uncle well." Colt nodded once. "He was a good man. Tough as they come. This ranch meant everything to him." Sarah lifted her chin. "Then we'll do our best to honor him and keep it running." A small smile touched his lips. Not mocking, just tired. "You know anything about cattle, Miss Mitchell?" "No," she admitted, "but we can learn." He studied her for another long moment. Those ice-blue eyes, unreadable learning takes time. He said, "And time's something you may not have. There are men around here who'd love to take this land from you. The only thing that's stopped them so far is me." Quote, Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the wind. "What do you mean? Your uncle's land is valuable. Water, grazing routes, rail access. Men like Marcus Dalton have been waiting for a chance to grab it. If word spreads that 2 young women from Boston own the place now, they'll come knocking, some with offers. Some with guns." Emma's hand tightened around Sarah's. "Then we'll need protection." Colt's jaw tightened. "That's right. And until we figure out who's loyal around here, you don't leave the house after dark." "Understand?" Sarah bristled. "We didn't come here to hide, Mr. Brennan." His gaze met hers. Steady, piercing. "Maybe not, but I intend to make sure you stay alive long enough to decide what kind of life you want." He turned and gestured toward the stairs. "Rooms are ready upstairs. Get some rest." We'll talk more in the morning." As his boots echoed away, Sarah stood in the stillness of the hall, her pulse still racing. Something about Colt Brennan unsettled her. Not just his size or his authority, but the quiet intensity behind every word he spoke. It wasn't fear she felt. It was something else, something she didn't quite have the courage to name. Later, as the storm raged outside, Sarah lay awake in her narrow bed. She could hear the faint creak of floorboards below, Colt moving through the house, checking windows, standing guard. She imagined him out there, his tall frame outlined against the glow of the lantern, watching the darkness beyond the glass for threats she couldn't see. Part of her wanted to feel safe knowing he was there. Another part wondered what secrets hid behind those cold blue eyes, and whether her uncle's most trusted man could truly be trusted at all. Outside, thunder rolled across the plains. Inside, the twins lay awake, hearts uneasy in a house that no longer felt entirely theirs. And downstairs, the giant cowboy kept watch, silent, waiting, and very much aware that danger was coming for all of them. The storm had passed by morning, leaving the world shining and new. From the porch, Sarah looked out over miles of open prairie, where sunlight spilled across the hills like molten gold. For the first time since their father's death, she felt something close to wonder. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Behind her, Colt Brennan stood with his coffee mug, tall and silent. "It can be," he said, "but don't let it fool you. This land doesn't forgive mistakes." Sarah turned toward him. "You make it sound like the land's alive." Colt's lips twitched. "Almost a smile out here. It might as well be Emma joined them, her hair still messy from sleep. So this is ours now," she said softly. "All of it." "For now," Colt said. "As long as you're willing to fight for it." The words hung heavy between them. Sarah met his eyes. "You think someone's going to try to take it?" "I don't think," Colt replied. "I know." He set his cup down and pointed toward the north ridge, where 3 dark figures on horseback were moving toward them. "And there's your first visitor." The riders approached with confident ease, their horses kicking up little puffs of dust. The man in front was older, with silver at his temples and a sharp, calculating smile. His coat was fine, too fine for a rancher. His eyes, though, were cold as steel. "Marcus Dalton," Colt said under his breath. Dalton dismounted smoothly and tipped his hat. "Miss Mitchell's," he greeted, his voice smooth and polite. "Allow me to offer my condolences on your uncle's passing." Sarah forced a polite smile. "Thank you, Mr. Dalton." Quote. Dalton's gaze swept over them both, and Sarah felt the chill of it. "I hear you've come to claim the Mitchell Ranch." "A bold move, considering the state it's in." "We'll manage," Emma said, lifting her chin. Dalton's smile widened, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You'll find it's a hard life out here for people without experience. I could save you a lot of trouble. I'll make a generous offer for the land. Enough to set you both up comfortably back." East Colt stepped forward, his voice low but firm. "They're not selling." Dalton's gaze flicked to him, amused. "Still playing guard dog, Brennan? Thought you'd have moved on by now." "Still here," Colt said, his tone calm. Still keeping watch, Dalton studied him for a moment, then turned back to Sarah. "Think carefully, Miss Mitchell. The frontier can be cruel to those who underestimate it." Sarah met his stare head-on. "We'll take our chances." For a heartbeat, the air seemed to freeze. Then Dalton laughed softly and swung into his saddle. "Suit yourselves. But don't say I didn't warn you." He tipped his hat again and rode off with his men, leaving a trail of dust behind. The silence that followed felt heavy. Emma exhaled shakily. "He didn't sound like a man who takes no for an answer." "He's not," Colt said. "That's why, from now on, you don't go anywhere without someone you trust." Sarah looked up at him. "You mean you?" His eyes softened, just slightly. "If you'll have me." That afternoon, Colt gathered the ranch hands in the bunkhouse. Sarah and Emma stood beside him as he addressed the men. "These are your new employers," Colt announced. "You'll take orders from them as you would from me. Anyone who's not on board can collect his pay and ride out." Most of the men nodded, though a few exchanged uneasy glances. One, a tall man with a scar down his cheek, stepped forward. "Begging your pardon, boss, but two city girls running a ranch? That doesn't sound like a plan." Sarah met his gaze. "You don't have to like it, Mr. Hayes," he said. "Mr. Hayes." She continued evenly. "You don't have to like it, but if you stay, you follow orders. Otherwise, you're free to go." Hayes's eyes narrowed. For a tense moment, no one spoke. Then he grinned. "Fair enough. Guess we'll see what you're made of." When the meeting ended, Colt caught up to Sarah outside. "You handled that well," he said. "Most people would have let me take over." Quote. Sarah smiled faintly. "If I'm going to run this ranch, I have to prove I can stand up for myself." Colt's gaze lingered on her, steady and unreadable. "You've got fire," he said finally. "Just make sure it doesn't burn you." As evening fell, Colt took them behind the barn to a makeshift shooting range. He handed each of them a rifle. "If you're going to stay here, you need to know how to use these." Emma hesitated. "You expect us to fight." "I expect you to survive," Colt said simply. Under his patient instruction, they learned how to hold the rifles, how to breathe, how to aim. Sarah's hands trembled at first, but she quickly found her rhythm. When her first shot struck near the center of the target, she turned, a little shocked. Colt's expression softened. "Not bad." "Luck," she said, trying to sound modest. He shook his head. Instinct. For the first time since leaving Boston, Sarah felt capable, not just a frightened girl in a strange land, but someone who might actually belong here. As the sun sank behind the mountains, Colt gathered the rifles. "Good work. Now lock the doors and stay inside." After dark, Sarah frowned. Why? Colt's eyes scanned the horizon. Because men like Dalton don't always wait for morning. She felt a shiver crawl up her spine. "And what about you?" He glanced back at her, the fading light catching his sharp features. "I'll be here, watching," and for reasons she couldn't quite explain, that thought, the image of Colt Brennan standing guard through the night, made her feel both safe and strangely unsteady all at once. Night fell like a curtain, heavy and still. The only light came from the lanterns glowing faintly in the ranch windows. Sarah stood at her upstairs window, watching as Colt walked the perimeter, his tall frame cutting a dark silhouette against the moonlit prairie. Every few minutes, he stopped to listen, to the wind, to the distant cries of coyotes, to anything that might not belong. Downstairs, Emma had already gone to bed. Sarah should have too, but her thoughts wouldn't quiet. She kept replaying the day. Dalton's cold smile, the distrust of the ranch hands, Colt's calm, steady voice as he'd taught her to shoot. The feel of the rifle, the sharp smell of gunpowder, the look of approval in his eyes when she'd hit the target. It wasn't fear she felt now. It was something stronger, a pull she couldn't quite understand. She went downstairs, the old wood creaking beneath her feet. Colt was just coming in from outside, his coat dusted with dirt and his expression grim. "Everything all right?" she asked quietly. He nodded, hanging his hat. For now, someone's been watching from the ridge. Couldn't see who, but they weren't friendly. Sarah's pulse quickened. "Do you think it's Dalton's men?" "I'd bet on it," Colt said. "He's testing us." Seeing how we react, he poured himself a cup of coffee, then looked at her, his expression softening. "You should rest, Miss Mitchell." "I can't sleep," she admitted. "Every creak in this house sounds like danger." Colt hesitated, then set his cup down. "Come with me." He led her to the porch, where the air was cool and the stars seemed close enough to touch. The land stretched endlessly before them, wide, wild, and beautiful. "When I first came here," Colt said, "your uncle told me something I never forgot. He said this land tests a person. It doesn't care who you were before you got here, only who you decide to become." Sarah looked at him. "And who did you become?" He smiled faintly, someone who finally stopped running. Quote, there was something in his voice, a weariness she hadn't noticed before, a sadness hidden beneath his strength. "You've lost people," she said softly. Colt's jaw tightened. "Everyone loses someone out here. The trick is learning to live with the ghosts." Sarah wanted to ask more, but a sound from the distance cut through the quiet, the faint echo of horses, fast and many. Colt's expression changed instantly inside. Now, before she could move, headlights, lanterns on horseback, appeared on the ridge. The faint thunder of hooves grew louder. Colt grabbed his rifle and shouted for the ranch hands. Sarah ran to wake Emma. The sisters hurried downstairs, fear twisting in their stomachs. Outside, Colt and the hands were already taking positions behind fences and wagons. "Stay in the pantry," Colt ordered, his voice low but steady. "If anything happens, you don't come out until I do." Sarah wanted to argue, but the look in his eyes stopped her. She squeezed his arm. "Be careful." He gave a single nod, then turned back to the yard. Moments later, the night exploded into chaos. Shouts, gunfire, the crack of rifles echoing across the open land. Sarah and Emma huddled in the dark pantry, listening as the world above them turned into a storm of noise and fear. The minutes crawled by. Then, suddenly, silence. Sarah's heart hammered in her chest. She could hear footsteps, heavy boots, and then the creak of the pantry door. Light spilled in. Colt stood there, face smeared with dust and sweat, but alive. "It's over," he said quietly. "You're safe." Sarah rushed forward, relief flooding her. "Is anyone?" "We lost one horse," he said, "but the men are fine. Dalton's riders won't be back soon." He looked exhausted, older somehow, but there was pride in his eyes, not for himself, but for them, for what they had defended together. The next morning the sun rose over a blackened barn and scattered debris. The cost was high, but the ranch still stood. Sarah and Emma helped the hands rebuild, their city clothes streaked with ash and dirt. They worked until their hands blistered and their muscles burned. That evening, when the fires were out and the land was quiet again, Colt found Sarah sitting on the fence, staring out over the prairie. "You did well," he said. She turned to him, smiling faintly. "So did you." "I just did my job." "No," she said, shaking her head. "You did more than that. You protected what mattered." He looked away, the corner of his mouth lifting. "You sound like your uncle." Sarah's eyes softened. Maybe I'm finally learning what he wanted us to learn. They stood in silence for a long moment, the wind tugging gently at her hair. Then Colt reached out, his hand rough and warm as it closed over hers. "This land's hard," he said quietly, "but sometimes it gives you things worth fighting for." Sarah met his eyes, and in that moment she knew he wasn't just talking about the ranch. For the first time, she didn't feel like a stranger in the West. She felt like she belonged to the land, to the ranch, to the life she was building. And somewhere in that vast, untamed world, she had found something even rarer. She had found a home.